I've spent a long time appreciating you very much for your work. So the first question was, what are some recent examples in your field of people who have shown intellectual courage?
Wow. Let me think. Self-identify as left of center. I tend to vote for people in the Democratic Party. So I'm going to pick two friends of mine who are right of center um, and who have shown themselves to be profiles in courage.
Mhm.
One is my co-teacher, Steve Calabrese.
Oh, yes.
He is the co-founder of the Federalist Society.
Mhm.
He is the co-chair of the Federalist Society. He and I have been friends ever since college. When we were in college, we were rivals. He and I both wanted to be the president of the Yale Political Union. He won, I lost. And from that day on, I thought, and he won fair and square. I said, I'm going to keep an eye on that fellow. That guy's pretty good. He beat me fair and square. And Steve and I have co-taught together at Yale Law School for, I think, either 10 or 11 years. And um, uh, the most members of the Federal Society voted for Donald Trump. So Steve heads an organization that is um, uh, Trump leaning. And
Mhm.
yet Steve has been a real profile and courage in defending the idea of birthright citizenship. He and I
Oh,
wrote something
yes.
together about this many years ago, and he stands by it. Um, and the Trump executive order is on this topic is an attack on the constitutional idea of birthright citizenship, as I understand it, and as
Mhm.
Steve understands it. And he has not run away from his earlier position. We co-authored something together on this, so I think that's quite admirable that he is standing by his long-standing and I would say clearly correct views. I'm going to pick another person. This person is not my co-teacher, but a former student of mine. Um, his name is Will Bode. He's a professor at the University of Chicago Law School. Um, he's a Federalist Society affiliate, if not a member. He
Mhm.
probably is a member. He has impeccable conservative credentials. He clerked for John Roberts, one of John Roberts'
Yeah.
favorite law clerks.
Yeah.
Uh, and yet Will Bode strongly argued against Will Bode strongly argued in favor of taking seriously Section 3 of the 14th Amendment,
Mhm.
which, as Will read it in a landmark article uh, co-authored with Michael Paulson,
Mhm.
uh, argued that Donald Trump was ineligible, constitutionally ineligible to serve as president, given the language of 14th Amendment, Section 3 and its underlying history. That position was unanimously rejected
Mhm.
by the Supreme Court, by John Roberts and his colleagues. Um, and Will, as did Steve, stuck by his position, which I think had a lot of intellectual integrity behind it, um, and good for Will.
Okay, those are very powerful examples. And after we're done, I may come back and share something with you on the birthright citizenship that may be of interest. But let's go on with these questions because I don't want that to be part of the recording. What are some underappreciated ways the work done in your field contributes to human understanding and well-being?
Well, I do law, and uh, law is especially about how humans relate to each other. We meet in the world, maybe we meet in the wild, maybe we meet on a city street, and we have to find some way, you and I, of interacting together. And Kant talks about humans as a kingdom of ends. We can't treat each other as if the other is a mere inanimate object, like a stone, or a hill. We can't treat each other as mere tameable beasts of the field. If I run across a wild horse in on a I might be able, under certain circumstances, maybe I can claim that horse as my own. I can tame it and make it my property. Um, um, uh, Hunters can reduce a deer or an elk under certain circumstances to their own thing. But we can't do that, you and I, as human beings. And law, um, um, at its deepest level, is all about that, how and there's so many different types of law. There's so-called private law and public law and international law. There's substantive law. There's procedural law. There's the law of law, because once we have first order rules about how you and I interact, we're going to need second order rules about a legal system, who decides, under what circumstances, judges and juries and prosecutors, and what happens when there's more than one legal system in the world. Oh, that's international law and conflicts of law, and how do we prove things? That's law of procedure and evidence. So law is quite complex, but at its core, and this may be underappreciated, it's basically all about how we're going to get along together. Ideally, how we're going to avoid harming each other. That's at a minimum. That's criminal law and tort law. But at its best, how we can cooperate together. We need to know what's mine and what's yours, and what's tradable and what's not. But once we have some of these baseline entitlements in place, okay, this is mine, it's me, and you have your person, and we each have to respect, the other's person and soul. But and this is mine because I made it, and maybe it just came out of my head. It's a song, maybe it's something that I fashioned from the materials around me. But this is mine, and that's yours. And maybe we could trade because you created things. Maybe we could partner up in all sorts of ways, contracts, corporate law. So at its best, law is not just about how we're not harming each other, but creating all sorts of opportunities for us to make beautiful music together, or do all sorts of things that are going to be good for us, and maybe even good for, one hopes, others in the world. And that's not fully appreciated. It's easy to make fun of law and lawyers. But so that's why you asked for something that maybe not quite appreciated, the deep morality of law rightly understood.
Uh, that's excellent. Let me ask you now, what do you see as one of the two most important challenges right now for maintaining high intellectual standards in your field?
Two challenges to that. One would obviously be political polarization, just not listening to people on the other side. It's a real problem. And the problem is in part created because if you're in the academy, often you generating ideas, and you think your ideas are right. Otherwise, you wouldn't have embraced them. And if your ideas are so clearly right, then the folks on the other side must be clearly wrong. And now how are you going to interact with them if you're clearly right and they're clearly wrong? So it's always been a challenge for people whose job it is to think about ideas and generate ideas, to have real respect for contrary ideas, and to avoid a certain kind of polarization. And maybe the other deep challenge is the idea game, the idea system is not in every single way entirely egalitarian. It may very well be that some people are better at idea generation and analysis, maybe that some ideas are better than others. And those of us who have a strong commitment to human equality, rightly understood, exist in a system that is in certain ways deeply elitist and not quite equal, and how one gets the right balance between the meritocratic essence of an intellect, perhaps an intellectual system, and the egalitarian ethos that also, of course, has to be part of the equation.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. How would you describe what the mission of the university ought to be, and why is that important?
I'm pretty traditionalist about this. It's about the preservation and extension and dissemination of human knowledge. It's about light and truth, preserving what truths we inherit, adding to the body of the world's knowledge, discovering new truths, and then trying to share these new discoveries and the fruits of old discoveries with the world. In universities, we also, this is closely connected, have a mission of training students in all of this. So to be very blunt, that mission is not exactly the same as the mission of social justice. It's not opposed to social justice essentially, but in certain respects, it is orthogonal to it, or it may be. It's a different project. So it's not the same project as the project perhaps of the Sierra Club, or the Democratic Party, or the Catholic Church, perhaps. So I'm a traditionalist. I think we in the academy need to understand our project very specifically as a Lux et Veritas enlightenment project all about human knowledge and truth.
As you look at it, in what ways does the public at large have a good understanding of the mission of the university, and in what ways does the public not understand the university's mission well?
I think the public might think that the universities are just another political institution like everything else, and expect us, therefore, to take positions on every matter of public concern. I think that's a mistake. Parties might do that, people might do that, but that's not what the university is all about. It has this narrower mission, and not everyone understands that, in part because some of our great leaders of universities, in fact, have not hewed to that more narrow understanding. And then once they start taking positions on this bill and that proposal in the public domain, members of the public say, well, you took a position on this, why not on that? And so I think the public may not understand the limited role of the university. And I also think it's possible that the public, at least parts of the public, don't understand how important it is to have that university with its mission in the long run, even if in the short and intermediate run, what the universities do and don't do can be quite irritating to many people.
Oh, very interesting. I'm going to go back to your previous answer on the question about the mission and ask you a further question. Um, do, where do you think when it comes to the search for and the dissemination of knowledge and truth? Where do you think universities are doing well right now in balancing the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake with the desire to make knowledge useful in the world? And where might they improve in that area?
I think we're doing a better job than before at outreach to folks who, because of all sorts of unfair systems in the world, didn't have access to some of our greatest universities. I think we're doing a much better job with financial aid than ever before. I say we, I'm talking about places like Yale, where I teach. I've also been a visiting professor over the years at places, just cards on the table, like Harvard, Stanford, Columbia, and Penn. So these are some of the richest, best endowed universities in the world. They're very, very wealthy and powerful institutions with storied histories and extraordinary resources. I think we're doing a better job of sharing that with folks who in previous generations were excluded just because they couldn't afford the sticker price. So too, I think we're doing a better job than ever before at being open to people around the world than we were even when I was a student half a century ago. I think we're doing a better job um, opening ourselves to women as well as men. In my lifetime, when I was born, Yale was not co-educational. And now it is. So I think we're doing a better job in opening ourselves to people of different ethnicities and faith perspectives and national origins and classes, socioeconomic classes, than in previous eras.
That's a very interesting response, and it reminds me of my own experience some 70, 60 years ago. My mother passionately wished for me to go to Harvard, but we never heard from Harvard, had not the slightest idea in the world how one would get into Harvard. And so, yes, that's a huge difference, a change between then and now.
And now your daughter is a very distinguished professor
Yes,
at,
exactly.
at Harvard.
The world
Yes.
has changed so much. Well, let me
Yes.
just ask one more question of you. Thinking back over just the last 5 years, what in your own work has pleasantly surprised you?
Um, Truthfully, that this is self-serving, very self-serving, but I actually feel that I'm not over the hill yet. I'm 66 years old, and in different disciplines, basically the average peak age varies. And in certain disciplines, oh, if you don't have your great idea before your 30th or 35th birthday, it's not going to happen, perhaps, just statistically. So, maybe in mathematics, for example, it's thought that you really have to show your stuff pretty early. Historians, it's sometimes said, sort of get mature with age. They get better, actually understand human nature, perhaps more. They've lived longer. They acquire a bigger database in some ways, and see connections that they may not have earlier. They may develop a sort of depth. So maybe like certain wines, historians improve with age. Mathematicians, maybe on average peak earlier. And I've just wondered, well, which is law more like? Is it like math? Is it like history? And I just do worry about being over the, and it's possible I'm just deluded, but I actually think I'm continuing to do work now that at the same level or better than work that I did earlier. And that's been a pleasant surprise because no one can know, whether that's going to happen or not. And who knows what the next 5 years will hold. But I can tell you, I'm 66 years old now. I've worried a lot about that. When am I going to reach my sell-by date? And the pleasant surprise is at least it feels to me as if I haven't yet.
Well, I have to say, it seems to me you're just hitting your stride. And I, I want to thank you for a rich and riveting conversation about that.